Let's go fast. Testing. Can I be heard?
All right, Steve, this is your test for the microphone. Can you hear us?
Yes, I hear it fine. Thank you.
Good morning.
Assistance on how to pronounce your last name.
I was just asked this same question. Okay, it's an incorrect spelling there, by the way. So, can I take that?
I believe that.
The S should be out there, and then you can just drop the I and say Peterson. So like Peterson without an N at the end.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Peterson. So just drop the I and Peterson.
So close. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank
Okay.
you.
I mean, it probably would have been, it comes from Dutch, so I guess it would have been Peterson with an N at the end.
Okay.
That would have kind of, if you translate it to English. So.
It's just, it was very unique and I did not want to butcher it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I get asked that a lot. But it's originally Dutch, I guess. So.
And you said that there was no S in the middle?
No, that S is incorrect there.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, we can turn it around and whatever you want to do, but the S is incorrect.
So
Okay.
Marcy.
Do I have to wear a mask when I'm up here? Or?
Socially distanced.
Okay, thank you.
You don't have to.
Wonderful if I don't have to.
Good morning. I'd like to call the meeting to order of the Pasco County Housing Finance Authority, March the 16th, 2021. At this time, I'd like to see if we have a quorum.
Yes. Skip Miller,
Present.
Mike Waters, Steve Hickman,
Here.
Jake Peterson,
Present.
and John Leffen.
Present. Thank you. At this time, it would be for public comment, or is there any public comment to be heard? Hearing none, we'll proceed with the approval of minutes of the last meeting, September the 22nd. If there are not any additions or corrections, a motion to approve the minutes as provided.
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes are accepted. New business, we have the overview of the community development programs. Marcy, would you please give us your update?
Thank you. Am I on? Oh, I have to leave it. Mike, this is going to take a long time then. Okay, so thank you for the opportunity to share. I wanted to give you a little bit more of an update of the work that we're doing in our department. The last time we met, I focused mostly on affordable housing and did an overview of that. You could go to the next slide. And we will continue with that, but I wanted to be a little bit more specific on some of the programs and the projects that we're funding. So the mission of our department is to improve the lives of Pasco citizens in 4 areas that we work on, and those are homeless initiatives, neighborhood revitalization, affordable housing, and community partnerships. And we use our state and federal funding to do that. And we do that in 2 manners. Basically, we serve individual households, meaning that there are people in my office that are doing direct service with clientele, basically low and moderate income persons. And we also collaborate with our community partners to make sure that the mission and these areas can be accomplished. So if you go to the next slide, we show our funding sources and the federal sources. We are an entitlement community, which means that we get grants directly from Housing and Urban Development. Basically, we get those grants because of the size of our county and the number of low and moderate income persons, as well as the age of our housing stock. So the Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, we get $2.9 million this year, coming on October 1. It's $67 shy of $3 million. And we put that out to request for proposals in the area of public services, which is basically social service programs, and development, which would be restoring public facilities, building new facilities, economic development. And it is our annual competitive application is just open now. The applications, we did our grant kickoff, and the applications were available on Monday. Our home investment partnership, $1.2 million we get in, and that is our funding source for affordable housing activities, for general construction, single family, rental, multifamily. And that is also an annual application, but also looking at things ongoing if they don't get into the annual. Our emergency solutions grant is for specifically for homeless outreach, emergency shelter, homeless prevention, rapid rehousing, and the homeless management information system, HMIS. And that's just about $247,000. And then the SHIP program, the State Housing Initiative Partnership, is our state funding. We did not get any money for that this year. I'll be interested to know if Mark is going to talk about what it looks like for the coming year. I'm hoping that we don't have another not funded year. But for all of these programs, we do get a considerable amount of program income coming in for the mortgages that we've given out over the years. And that has not only sustained us personally in our way of our staffing, but it has enabled us to continue our program. So if you go into the next slide, I wanted to share with you that the county and the department got a number of different sources of CARES Act funding, and all of it was spent by the end of December. And we got $8 million for direct assistance to Pasco residents, and that came from the $96 million that the county got. So the county, when they got $96 million, made the decision that one of the ways that we could really help our citizens to recover as quickly as possible from COVID-19 was to put out direct assistance to help them with mortgage, rent, utility assistance. And so $8 million was spent between the partners that our department partnered with, nonprofits and human services. So we put out $8 million into the community. And then we got an additional $2.6 million directly from the Florida Housing Finance Agency. And that was administered directly from our department to citizens. So quick math, $10.6 million went out into the community by the end of December to help people remain stable in their homes, which is considerable. And then we also got a round of funding, all from the CARES Act, into CDBG. So it was CDBG for COVID-19 and also ESG COVID-19. And the second round for CDBG COVID, which is just about $2 million, we are just putting out on the streets now. So I heard a very interesting comment on the news the other day after the American Rescue Act was passed, and a very astute congressman said, you know, it's a lot of work to spend trillions of dollars. And it's a lot of, you know, it might be easy to pass a bill, but it takes a lot of work once it starts coming down the line and it has to be implemented. So I didn't feel bad that the fact that it's taking us a year to get one of those tranches of funding out, because I know there's communities all over the country that haven't gotten any of it out. So as we go on to the next slide, we'll show the results of the Pasco Cares update. By the way, very proud of our team internally throughout the county that worked on this. Became the team of the year. So we had people from community development, from human services, IT, the libraries, public information, just a whole round of people really pivoting their work to get this money out into the community, and very proud of everybody's accomplishment. But along with the money, you could see that 691 people were helped through our office. And then just under 1,000 people helped with our local community partners. So that's what we did up through the end of December. But let's look at some of the other programs that we have coming up in the next slide. For our using some of that money, that COVID-related money for CDBG, we purchased an 8-plex on Pasadena, which is just near the corner of Grand and Trouble Creek in Newport Richey. And it's this 8-plex courtyard. It's quite lovely. It will be lovely. So we worked with St. Vincent de Paul to buy it, and we're renovating it now. So we use CDBG to buy it, and we're using SHIP to renovate it. And then we'll be able to either shelter chronically homeless in place to self-isolate, because that's the safest place for them to be during a pandemic is housed safely. And then when that's over, use it for permanent supportive housing. So that's in the works now. We have on the next slide our coordinated investment plan, and this was the tranche of ESG money. We got $3.8 million, and what we're doing is working on a housing surge with community partners. This is basically being done with St. Vincent de Paul to house people right off the streets. So we have a very large population of unsheltered homeless here in the county, and really, again, the argument to prepare, prevent, and respond to COVID-19. When it comes to homeless, the best thing to do is to house them. So we're taking people directly off the streets from the encampments and putting them into permanent housing. We thought we'd be a little bit further along than we are. And what we found, and I'm sure we're not the only community that is like this, is that because of the eviction moratorium, the housing and rental market has just clamped down. And so there are very few rentals, and they're not turning over. So we have to date, 111 people have been housed. So this is since October, November, which considering the fact that they were in encampments and on the street, that's a pretty good number of success. I believe yesterday, I think I heard we have a weekly call, there were another 5. So we are now at the halfway mark. And again, we expected to be higher than that, but the cost of using that $3.8 million is including the rent, case management, outreach, so it's all encompassing. So we're very excited about this, and to see this change in our community will be very transformative. So we're very excited for using our COVID money in this way to end homelessness. And then I've shown you this slide before just as an overview, so we can always keep in perspective what we're really trying to do here when it comes to affordable housing. We're trying to create a balanced community, okay? Being able to have supportive housing. We talked about ending homelessness and putting people straight from the streets into units and having that supportive housing for them, affordable rental housing, which is much of what you do here, and then working in affordable home ownership, very much thanks to our partners with Habitat. So we want to make sure, and then the market, market housing takes care of itself, but we're involved in this spectrum of the housing. So here's some of the projects that we have coming up that we're working on now. To continue, this is one of the homes in Town and Country Villas. Yep. So we're doing partnerships with Habitat, also on the east side, Tampa Bay CDC. I believe that we just finished our last pop home with them. And then we're starting a project for 10 affordable single homes with the Housing and Education Alliance. They are new to Pasco County. They've done most of their work in Hillsborough and Pinellas, so we're excited to have them. And then we're also doing a lot of work with rental housing, and then we're using both home, sometimes CDBG and SHIP, to acquire affordable rental housing, renovate, or new construction. So here are the things that are on the books. We're just getting ready to close on 110 units of rental housing in Dade City. It's closing next month. It's fully leased with the Housing Trust Group out of Coral Gables or Miami. Ozadam Village 3 are 30 units of affordable housing in Newport Richey with St. Vincent de Paul. That is the 3-story building, and we should probably start leasing that, I'm thinking in April. We haven't broke ground yet, but we're getting ready to go into contract with the Pasco County Housing Authority to do 77 units of rental housing on Massachusetts Avenue for veterans. And they will probably start going vertical in 2022, but we should close on that sometime within the next couple of months. And then also the extension of Spear Village, the second part of it, 50 units of supportive housing off of Plath Road with youth and family alternatives. So that shows you that in this span of 2, probably tops 3 years, we're looking at 140 to 260 units of affordable housing going in the county. Just a drop in the bucket of what is needed. But on the next slide, you see that, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, that Tanager Square was one of the projects that was approved through Florida Housing Finance Corporation, and that's going to be 88 units of affordable family housing. And on the map, you can see it's off of Old County Road 54. They'll be doing 60% or below of the AMI, and it's in Commission District 3. So we will be contributing to that as well. And then last but not least, I think it's always important to note when I said that that we do work directly with low and moderate income persons in our office. And so one of our highlighted programs is owner occupied rehab, because we always want to make sure that people who are homeowners, especially those that are aging in their houses or disabled or have other conditions, we want to make sure that they stay housed. We don't want them to cycle into homelessness. So we do a significant number of owner occupied rehabs. And I want to add that actually with our first round of CARES funding, well, not with CARES, with the coronavirus relief funds that came from Florida Housing Finance, we also used some of that money for doing roofs and AC units. We did 26 homes in 3 months for that program. So we use primarily SHIP money to do this, and I think it's a really critical component of the work that we do. So last but not least, I just want you to know that we seem to always keep busy in our office. And we also got another round of funding. And this was at the end of December with the Consolidated Appropriation Act signed into law on 12/21. And that included emergency rental assistance program. It came through the U.S. Treasury, providing housing stability to those households that have been financially impacted through COVID-19 virus. For rental and utility assistance for tenants earning less than 80% of the area median income, we've created the program called HEART, Helping with Emergency Assistance Relief for Tenants. And we, as a county, got $16.7 million for that. And this was available to any community that was 200,000 and over. And then the county or the city had to apply for it. So we've implemented the program, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. So 90% of the funds have to be used for direct rental assistance, rental arrears, utilities, home energy costs, any expenses related to housing, and only 10% for admin. Eligible households include those that are 80% or below the median income, qualifies for unemployment, or has experienced a reduction in household income due to COVID-19, or demonstrates a risk of experiencing homelessness or housing instability. So what is different about the CARES program that we did at the end of last year and this program is that the CARES program, the money came to the county, and we, as the county and our office, we created the program. This program was created by the U.S. Treasury. So we had less flexibility. Basically, the U.S. Treasury said, this is how you do it. This is what you need to do. And one of the first things they said was, we want to make sure that this money is going to the people most in need. And I think we've heard some of this being talked about, especially out of Washington, D.C., is rather than this widespread approach of just getting money out there, let's make sure it's targeted. And so for this program, we have to prioritize 50% or below the median income and any individual who has been unemployed 90 days or more. And this gives you an idea of the income levels that we're dealing with. These, by the way, these income levels change right around this time, March or April of every year. So basically, to explain the prioritization, if Phil and I were both put in our applications and we both were, let's say, a family of one, and Phil was earning $35,000 a year and I was earning $23,000 a year, my application would be funded and I would be assisted before Phil. Sorry, Phil. Next slide. Here's where we had some flexibility, and what we decided to do is be very broad, because with all of these programs comes a deadline of spending money, and you don't want to get left at the end of the year with money left over that goes back to the U.S. Treasury. And number one, and number two, we had no idea, since we had already put $10 million out to the community, we really didn't know what the need was. So we decided to keep the program as broad as was allowed by the U.S. Treasury. So with that, we can provide up to 12 months of assistance and additional 3 months if it's needed and if the money is there. We have to provide arrears before we could go forward. And we can provide up to 3 months in advance as long as the lease shows it and as long as the person qualifies, and they have to always be recertified. We could go back as far as March 13th when COVID was announced as a pandemic. So, for example, for people coming in now that didn't pay their rent all last year, we could pay all that from April to December, and then January, February, March. We could do that all in one fell swoop. So there are a couple of ways. There's actually 3 ways that our renters can apply. They could go through the Human Services Division online portal, and that is opened up periodically and with great media fanfare. You can also go through our partner agencies. So Community Development has partnered with 11 agencies out in the community, so you could go directly to any of those. We're all doing the exact same thing, same parameters, same application. It's all the same. Or we've also hired somebody internally who's working directly with landlords. So let's say a landlord who, by the way, have really been hit hard through all of this, have tenants who are not paying their rent and don't want to apply or haven't applied or whatever, the landlord can come to us and get the application started. We ultimately will still need to go back to the tenant, but at least they could get the ball rolling. And all this information is available online, especially on our website. I also want to make note that all the payments for all of our programs go directly to the landlord or the utility company. It's never given to the tenant himself or herself. Here's a list of our partners. So you can see they're all over the community. And what's helpful about this is our approach to this is that, not everybody has the ability to pick up their phone and make and do an application or even get online. And I know that with a lot of these programs, the vaccination, these rental programs, everything being online has created almost a stress in itself because it opens up and 5 or 10 minutes later it closes and it's created. So we like the fact that there's different opportunities. So they could go face to face. They can make an appointment and go in and safely work with somebody. They could go. We also have an online portal with this program where they could go onto the Homeless Coalition's website and put in some of their information, and then it will get forwarded to one of our partners. So they have different opportunities to do that. And this explains what I just said. So we could go to the next one. And then this also explains what we're doing with our landlords and our tenants. So, and again, making the comment that all payments are made directly to the landlord or the utility company. So that's a little bit about how we've been keeping busy in our office and how we've been assisting so many of our people in our community, improving their lives through the homeless initiatives, neighborhood revitalization, affordable housing, and community partnerships. They're all very significant in making that difference. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Marcy. That was an excellent update and one of the best I've had since I've been involved with Pasco County. As you said, unfortunately, that's not near enough, and I'm going to be very interested in what Mark has to say about the SHIP funds in a minute. In the meantime, is there any questions from the advisory committee for Marcy on her presentation or comments?
I do, actually, Marcy. So amazing and very enlightening for me as well. How do citizens learn about all the different programs that exist and the opportunities? Because I do a lot of the work with United Way, and I know there's a lot of inquiries there. And I was unaware of everything we do, and I sit here. So how's the best thing for a citizen to go about learning?
So certainly our website is the best place. And then, for example, for all these programs, we put out news releases and media releases. So, and then all of the different partners as well. So that is the best way to learn about it. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, when we get a chance to tweet. So
if an individual calls 211, are they potentially referred to you?
It depends on what they call for. They could certainly just call our office to find out what's available, and we're happy to route them around as well.
Okay. Thank you.
No, as always from my side, very, very exciting, very impressive, encouraging. I would just like to receive this via email as well so that I can pass it on to relevant people.
We will do that. We will send out the presentation to all the advisory board members. Phil will do that.
Okay, with no further questions or comments from Marcy, we'll move on to the agenda with the update on tax credit projects. Mr. Henderson, our financial advisor.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. Well, they put up on the screen a little page and a half memo that I wrote. I'm not going to go through every bit of that, but the reason we wanted to do this because it has relevance going into the 2021 cycles. And so wanted to let you know what happened with the action that you took last year. You may remember that 2 years ago, you selected the Bayonet Gardens deal, and the Tanager Square deal had been sort of your number two choice. That was in 2019. In 2020, the Florida Housing set up a system where they were going to fund 5 local preference, known as the Local Government Area of Opportunity Funding, LGAOF, 5 of those off the top in 5 different counties. And the middle county tax credits are incredibly competitive. There's only about a 16% chance that a deal that's submitted is funded. So utilizing by designating a deal with the local preference, which requires giving them a higher level of local financial support, it increases the chance that a deal will get funded. So in 2020, they said, okay, we're going to fund 5 of these off the top. And 3 of those 5 are going to be deals that were designated as local preference in 2019, but didn't get funded. And of that group, so when you made a selection last year, you selected again for the second time Bayonet Gardens as the priority deal for Pasco County, because that increased the chances that it would be funded as a repeat local preference deal. I know this is pretty arcane, but it's how the Florida housing system works, and but it all made sense. And basically, the deals that were in effect the 2-time local preference deals, there was a 37.5% chance that if you were one of those, you get funded, as opposed to a 16% chance overall. But the fact is that among the repeat deals, it's still a lottery. It's just a lottery among a much smaller group of deals. And the Bayonet Gardens deal pulled a very high lottery number. That's just random. And the first 3 deals selected were from Clay, St. Johns, and St. Lucie County. Then they funded 2 other priority deals, local LGAOF deals that weren't repeat. And then they started just basically going to the lowest lottery number in counties that hadn't got a deal yet. And the Tanager deal had pulled a very low lottery number, and it was selected in the general pool of funding, basically due to its low lottery number. So that's a kind of a lot of inside baseball. But the point was that there was a much higher chance that the Bayonet deal would have been funded, but it's still an odds, not a certainty. And the Tanager deal was funded, and again, it was a very good deal and had been your number 2 choice in 2019. So we're very pleased that it was done. So what's this have to do though with 2021? And that's the key. Florida Housing is continuing its system where it's going to give a preference and off the top fund deals that were picked in the previous year as a local preference, but not funded. So there is clearly an opportunity, if the county and the HFA choose it, to conduct another LGAOF NOFA this year, but more importantly, if they still have the site control, a very, an increased chance that the bayonet deal, if you selected it, if they applied and you selected it, would be funded. So that's been your number one choice. And the incentives are still there at Florida Housing to turn that in again. And because they're going to fund first off the top deals like bayonet that have been designated but not funded. So I'm happy to answer questions. The timing this year, Florida Housing is moving it up. So they're going to, very likely that applications may be due as early as September. So if we're going to embark on this, we need to probably launch it in May or June of this year.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions from the advisory committee members at this point from Mr. Henderson? Okay. Mark, is there any update on the SHIP funds for next year?
Yes, there is, and thank you. The governor recommended funding for housing of $423.3 million, with 296.6 of that in SHIP. If the governor's recommendation is approved by the legislature, Pasco County will get about 7.6 million in SHIP funds. Where it's lining up now is it's deja vu all over again. The Senate appears to be headed towards fully funding, though it's not a lock yet. And the House seems to be headed towards some much lower level of funding. And it'll be fought out in conference committee. So the critical thing for Pasco County is your state senator, Wilton Simpson, is the president of the Senate. And it's really likely at the end of the day going to come down to Wilton Simpson and how hard he pushes back on the House position and insists that the Senate position on funding be the one that's adopted in conference. So we know he's been a big housing supporter. The Senate's been there. But the fact that the Senate may initially put it in the budget is great, but the real test will be when they get to conference, do they hold firm and push the House to accept the Senate position when it gets there. That seems to be where it's headed. Any of you that can contact your local representatives, there's a massive positive economic impact on Pasco County with full funding. If you go to the Sadowski Coalition website, which is www.sadowskicoalition.com, you can pull one-pagers on any legislator and use it in contacting either them or their aide to advocate for full funding. So that's where we stand at this point. Happy to answer questions.
Are there any questions from any of the advisory committee members at this point for Mr. Henderson regarding the SHIP funds? I concur that any of us that are associated with Pasco County's affordable housing do contact our representatives, because that is important, especially with Mr. Simpson in the state Senate president. And we have an opportunity here if we take advantage of it. So that was just my comment.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Henderson. Very, very good.
Can I
Thank
ask
you.
a question, please?
Question?
Before we lose Mr. Hendrickson, does with the approval of Tanager Square, will that mean that we will issue a bond for that, or does that not play out because they were not our
No,
applicants?
they'll get the 9% credit. I mean, that Tanager Square got picked for, the 9% credits, so they'll move forward with that. And Marcy, we should have a sidebar because there's no reason they need a significant local contribution when they have 9% credits. So,
Then my second question is to the SHIP discussion. What is the discussion in the state about the budget overall? And has there been such a decrease in revenue where there are big holes that need to be that funds need to be swept?
Well, the answer to that is, in reality, revenue has not dropped anywhere near as much as had been projected. And revenue is coming in at above projected levels now. So the whole, that we have this massive deficit and we need to sweep to cover it was largely baloney. I mean, we understand why the governor did what he did back last June. Nobody knew what was going to happen to the revenue at that point. So I'm not, faulting the governor for being, conservative on his budget and vetoes back in June. But by January, we realized that the revenue collections never drop like they thought they would and are pretty healthy. Then on top of that, they just got dropped into their lap, X billion dollars of federal money. Marcy, your question is, in reality, is there some big budget shortfall that will require them to sweep trust funds? No. Will the House use that as an excuse to sweep trust funds? Probably yes. But it's not really, it's not valid. It's just a seemingly rational, reason to sweep trust funds that they just want to sweep anyway. So, but it's not a necessity. And the governor put together, his budget, I think using what they consider to be optimistic revenue estimates that probably are much closer to reality than the ones the House and Senate had thought would be there.
Thank you.
One last question I might have, and Mark, if you can respond to your expertise, is about the eviction notice expiration that's going to hit nationally. Any type of scenarios that are going to impact an increase in not only demand for affordable housing and assistance and rentals, and who knows what the government may or may not do in that future. I know it's a very open-ended question, but just in preparation, is there something we need to be aware of or doing in preparation for changes to a large eviction notices coming up until employment becomes, some projections to 4% nationally? We'll see.
Yeah, it's really interesting that it is a big picture issue that's going to be out there. And Marcy, with all that money she's getting, is, going to be getting a lot of people's rent paid so that hopefully they won't be in the eviction line when that time comes. But this was something that's really interesting, is that in the world of affordable housing, bonds, tax credits, developers actually have found that they have a very low percentage of their residents that have not paid the rent. So in the affordable portfolio, there aren't a lot of people teed up for eviction. They, overwhelmingly, they are finding a way, either through, programs like Marcy's or just by, hook, crook, other ways, to not they really do not want to lose that affordable apartment, and they're good. And on elderly deals, the rent, there's been virtually no loss in rental income on the affordable side, because there has not been any reduction of any kind of note for people that are elderly because of COVID. If you're on fixed income, your income didn't go down.
Thank you, Mark. All right, that should complete our tax credit project updates, and we'll move on the agenda to the presentation for Sunshine Law. Ms. Fagan.
Good morning, board members. Jane Fagan, Senior Assistant County Attorney. I know most of you have heard this presentation before, but I think it's always helpful to do an annual update just to refresh everyone's recollections about the particular laws that impact you as board members for a public entity, as opposed to those that might apply in the private sector. Specifically, I'm going to give you a brief discussion, a brief overview of Sunshine Law, public records, and ethics as it relates to you as board members. First topic I want to touch on is Sunshine Law. Now, the statute defines the Sunshine Law as being applicable to any gatherings of 2 or more members of the same public board to discuss any matter which will foreseeably come before the board for action. Now, the definition of a gathering has really been broadened over the last couple of years. So it includes not only a face-to-face meeting, but also conversations on the phone, email exchanges, Facebook posts, etc. Text conversations. I can't tell you how much people are out interested in Facebook and text conversations. It has to involve 2 or more members on the same council, commission, or authority, where the topic of discussion is a matter that likely or foreseeably will be considered or voted on by the entity at an upcoming meeting. So with respect to, so for example, you could see each other and you could talk about Morris's presentation or Mark's presentation. That's totally acceptable, because that's not going to come up for a vote before this board. There's no action required on that. You could also, to have a social gathering. You could certainly have conversations about, what's happening in the legislature with the SHIP money, etc. That's all totally permissible under the law, because again, none of those actions are coming up to you directly for a voting. It would apply to situations where, for example, as Mark said, we're probably going to be doing another solicitation for the sale program and also for the 9% credit. Now, the Sunshine Law would preclude you as a board member from having a substantive conversation with another board member outside a publicly noticed meeting like this one. So, for example, if you saw each other at a luncheon or a business function, you couldn't really talk about, well, I like this applicant versus that applicant. That would be considered a violation of the law. So, and again, it also applies to, we've had situations quite frequently now where an elected official or a board member will want to share their position about a particular topic. And that's fine. You can share it with your fellow board members, but it's important for the board members not to respond back, not to engage in a conversation. So that would include emails, a text, or like a Facebook post. So, and as I said before, people are becoming much more savvy about what to look for and how to find things. You may have had what appears to what was actually an inadvertent conversation, but it might appear to be a conversation that may violate the Sunshine Law. So a lot of it's just common sense. So it's Sunshine Law is applicable to. It's applicable to these meetings, to any subcommittee or committee meetings. Like, for example, a few years ago, we actually had a subcommittee for the selection of a financial advisor. The Sunshine Law would apply to members of that particular group. Also applies to casual gatherings, but only when you're talking about topics that might come before the HFA as a whole. And telephone, email, text. You also can't use someone like Marcy or Phil or myself or Mark to share your position with other people and to have us take that information back to the first person who asked the question. So, and also applies discussions before and after public meetings, which is why sometimes you may see me saying, please don't talk about that anymore. We're off the records. So, but again, it's just a question of just remembering that if there's something that's going to come before the board for action, it's better not to have a conversation about anything like that outside of a public meeting notice, a meeting. So now you can meet privately, certainly with myself and Marcy, and you can go with Mark or some other governmental entity member. You can also talk to citizens about a particular group. We've had situations where perhaps sometimes developers reach out. That's okay. But again, you just have to be careful that you don't share the results of that conversation with another board member. Without, you can talk about the conversation in a public meeting, but not at like a social gathering or some other non-publicly advertised function. And with respect to where these meetings are held, it has to be a place that's open and accessible to the public. This is a very important element of the Sunshine Law. And it's becoming a bigger issue. I don't know if you saw at the state level. The state, for the legislature, is actually making the public go to a different building to provide public comment. And we've tried to accommodate it as a county. We've tried to accommodate public comment by, for example, allowing people to email us, to participate through WebEx. And also we have a public kiosk set outside. If someone has questions or comments they want to make about something that's on a board meeting agenda. So this whole concept of the right to speak on behalf of citizens is really a crucial concept for under the law in Florida. But after saying that, let's say the chairperson also has the right to put a limit on the amount of time a particular party can speak before the group, or if they become, overly aggressive or abusive, we can certainly also take steps to foreclose or stop that conversation. And most people, this group tends to follow the norm, which is 3 minutes for an individual, 5 minutes for a group organization. Again, that's considered a reasonable time. The law was also changed about 2 years ago to require that public comment be part of the beginning of the meeting to make sure that people don't sit through a long meeting and don't have, especially when you're talking about an item that is not necessarily a public hearing item. Like for example, on the board agenda, most of these things that we will go through today, they're not something we would normally take public comment on for each of these topics. But if there's a public comment section at the front, people have a chance to say, well, I want to talk about this item on the agenda, and here's my opinion. So again, gives the public the opportunity to share their opinion with you, who may be the decision makers. So again, just kind of touching on letters, emails, texts, Facebooks between board members. I'm sorry, tell us the next slide. Again, if you want to share your position, that's fine. Even if you want to share your statement of how you think you may vote, that's okay too. We just, you as another board member who receives this information can't respond. That's why when we send out our administrative notices, even about meeting dates and meeting times, we're a little conservative in that we say, please don't reply to all, just copy to the person who sent you the information to avoid any potential inadvertent violation of the law. So you can't engage in a dialogue outside of a public notice meeting. And again, we've seen a major surge with respect to public records requests where people are very much interested in Facebook, and they're actually going on themselves to find this information out. They're also asking about text and everything. And the problem with that, with the text concept, is if it's something that happened, say 2 years ago, did you keep that? Maybe you didn't. And if you didn't keep it, that may cause an issue. So that's why we just caution to be careful how you use your electronic devices. And we can't use a staff person to poll or share information with other board members. So, and the reason why we stress this is because this law does have some serious penalties associated with it. The penalties are suspension or removal from your official duties. If it's a knowing violation, if they can prove that you deliberately violated the law, you actually, it's a second degree misdemeanor, and you can be fined and or put in jail. Normally it's a fine, but still. Unintentional violation is considered a non-criminal infraction, and again, you would be fined. You also could be sued personally, and you could have to pay the complainant's attorney's fees if they prevail. So again, you don't want to avoid that, don't have to incur any undue legal fees or unnecessary legal fees. You know, I can say that as an attorney, you don't always like to pay us, so, but yes, that's basically in a nutshell. Now, with respect to the Florida Public Records Law, I just want to explain how this impacts you. Florida has one of the broadest public records laws in the state, and in the country, I should say. And basically, every document, it doesn't matter what form it's in, it can be a text, it can be an email, it can be a recording, it can be a videotape, all constitute a public record. And basically that means it has to be made available to the public for inspection and or copying unless a specific exemption applies. So for example, exemptions that might apply are examples, most common examples are like things like social security numbers or bank account numbers. Like if you apply for assistance through Marcy's program or something like that, or you want to pay your social security number and your bank account number would be exempt from disclosure. It would literally be blacked out if someone asks for a copy of your application. Other examples are like, law enforcement, code enforcement, judicial mattresses, and those are their spouses. So, there's a lot of exemptions, but in your world, what it really means is when you, for example, receive copies of the agenda, the handouts associated with the agenda, even the applications you get for review for consideration of funding, those are all public records. And if you, for example, make notes on them or you have separate notes, that by itself your notes are not necessarily a public record, but if you share them with someone, for example, you take a copy and give them to staff, or you share them at the board meeting, those personal notes also become a public record. So, because it's intended to formalize or communicate knowledge. So, but with respect to what we've done in the past is, your documents that we give you for review before you take action are generally copies of what we've also received. So the law also says if it has no legal or physical value or it's redundant or duplicative, it's not considered, you don't have to retain it as a public record, which is why we normally ask you just leave your books on the dais when you're done, because we have the official copies of those applications and the rest of the information received with respect to an application. So if you personally in capacity receive a public records request from a private party or another governmental entity about anything relating to your activities with respect to this board, we would ask that you share that immediately with the market and itself, because the law also has a requirement that you have to promptly respond to those requests. So, and while the law there's no specific definition in the law about what constitutes a prompt response, you have to demonstrate that you're attempting to do that. And, we actually have, there was a case that said half an hour was too long based on certain circumstances. So again, it's our role to assist in that, to make sure that that response is received and forwarded to the requester in a prompt manner. So that's sort of the public records law aspects. So the other big issue that affects your world is ethics. Now you all are subject to the Public Officers and Officials Code of Ethics under Chapter 112. And you're covered as a public officer because you're elected or appointed to hold an office in an agency, including serving on an advisory board. So there's basically two types of ethics laws, prohibitions against certain actions and requirements of certain disclosures be made to the public. So for your purposes, the most important ones are the prohibition against certain actions or conduct. The first and most common is the quid pro quo situation. So you as a public officer can't solicit or accept anything of value to the recipient or to you, including a gift, based on understanding that your official action or judgment will be influenced thereby. Basically, we're talking about a bribe. So, but it can be subtle. Sometimes someone can say, well, I heard you're raising funds for this organization. I'm willing to make a large donation, if you think about my project a little more positively. So it could be indirect too. So, but again, that would be a prohibited example of prohibited activity. Also, you can't accept any compensation payment or anything of value when you know the exercise of reasonable care was given to influence a vote or action in which the officer was expected to participate in their official capacity. So someone offers you offers to take you out to dinner, offers to lend you their condo at the beach, right before a particular vote is taken. That's the kind of thing that has value and also creates the impression that it could have been offered to you to help influence your vote on the upcoming matter. So again, it's just a lot of common sense. So the other prohibition is doing business with one's agency. And I know this one's a little more complicated because, if you work for a bank or a financial agency, for example, and we have a developer who's seeking funding, the question is, would that constitute doing business with one's agency? And we review the ethics laws and it appears that would not be a problem. But this is also specific to, you can't purchase, rent, lease any property, goods, services, or that your agency from a business entity in which the officer is or her spouse or a child own more than 5% interest. So, a perfect example of that is that we've had situations, for example, where a county employee who is purchasing, who has the authority to make a recommendation about a purchase, his family business is selling certain kinds of equipment. So we can't engage into transaction. He can't recommend that the county buy things for his business. Because again, this is a perfect example of doing business with one's agencies. There are certain circumstances where there are exceptions to that, but that would be an example of what would be precluded activity. And again, the prohibition applies not only to yourself, but also impacts your spouse, your child, if they own more than 5% of the business. The other thing to be conscious of is conflicting employment or contracts. You're prohibited from holding any employment or contractual relationship with a business entity or agency regulated by or doing business with his or her public agency. Now, you're not in the regulatory business, so that's kind of off the table. But you do have to think about doing business with his or her public agency, and that's the same thing. The example I gave before, if you work for a bank and your bank is providing financing at some point to the developer at stage, but it's usually so removed that there's no direct benefit to you. So it would not necessarily be a violation of this provision of the state law. And it's a frequently recurring conflict. We've had some examples. I think the most common one I've seen is where, in case of an engineer, you're an engineer and you're sitting on a public board and you're going to be, you work for a firm, and that firm is doing work for a developer that's coming before the board. And it's a frequently, you're going to be involved in that particular project. That would be an example of a prohibited employment relationship, especially if that was a designated developer, and so it's going to be a recurring conflict. So those are the kind of things you want to be careful about. If you have any questions, these decisions are very, very fact specific. So any questions you have, please just give me a call and I'll be happy to go over them. I guess, it's examples where this kind of prohibition, one applies if something is awarded through a sealed competitive bidding or a public procurement like we do with some of our solicitations. Or where the business entity involved is the only source of supply, so therefore there's no potential for preferential treatment. You're the only person that provides it. Now, this last slide on annual disclosure is really important. This is something that's come up before. We've got a opinion this year. We actually confirmed it with the Florida Commission on Ethics. You, in your capacity as a board member, do not have to file a statement of financial disclosure with the state. A lot of the advisory boards and other agencies under the county administrator, under the county board of county commissioners, excuse me, have that obligation under the state law. But the Ethics Commission has determined that you, in your capacity as a board member, do not qualify as a local official as defined under that section of the statute. So I know that issue has come up in the past. So, and if you think there is a conflict of interest, or you have a concern about whether or not there is a conflict, you should always discuss it with Marcy or myself first. And if there one is deemed to exist, you have to disclose it at the meeting, and you have to abstain from the vote before the vote actually happens. And then we have to report it to the Department of State, et cetera, within a specific period of time. So actually, it's within 15 days after the meeting has happened, you have to physically fill out a form and report it. So basically, a lot of this is just common sense, exercising good judgment, and just really learning the rules, understanding how they apply to you. So because the goal is just to serve public interest, and make sure that the public funds that are spent are used in the most appropriate manner. So that's sort of it. So I just want to thank you for your time, and I don't know if you have any questions, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Excellent. Thank you, Attorney Fagan. John had to step away for a second, so in his absence, I'll ask, does anyone have any questions or comments?
No questions on my side, thank you.
Anyone on our virtual display? Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We promise not to talk to anyone.
Well, be social. Be
I'm kidding.
You're social.
All right, perfect. Well, next on the agenda is our approval of the 2021 HFA meeting times. It's the last attachment in the packet. Obviously, everything for now is scheduled at this address, same location. Our upcoming dates are March 16th, which is a Tuesday, June 15th, which is a Tuesday, September 21st, which is a Tuesday, and December 14th. So I know that's proposed as of today, obviously subject to change. Did we need to vote or comment on that? Okay.
You need to vote on.
Got you. Vote if we accept those dates.
Yes, please.
So John's coming back. I'll let him. I believe we need a quorum to vote, correct?
Yes, we do. And I would also note that, as Mark indicated, based on the application period that the Florida Housing Corporation is a place we may have to have a meeting in May. You consider applications for sale or 9% credit.
Okay.
But for now, these would be these would be the recommended meeting dates.
Okay, for the future meeting dates then, is there a motion to accept the dates as presented?
Yes.
Second.
I'll second.
So as needed, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Motion passed.
For purposes, because we are doing a virtual meeting, we actually need a voice vote.
All righty.
So if you would mind.
Would the clerk please ask for a voice vote?
Skip Miller,
Aye.
Steve Hickman,
Aye.
Jake Peterson,
Aye.
Karen John Leppin.
Aye. Motion passed. As needed, of course, and if any changes, then please present them. Are there any other comments or old business to be brought before the advisory committee today? If not, Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you all. We very much appreciate the three of you coming in.
Yes, thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, sure thing.
Yes. As you can see, the board is, they made efforts to try to